The first time she whispered it to me, her voice was barely a breath. "Please don't tell anyone I'm pregnant." We were standing in my kitchen, the one with the stubborn window that never quite closed all the way, letting in the smell of rain and wet pavement even on dry days. The kettle was screaming on the stove, and I remember thinking how strange it was that something so loud could exist in the middle of a secret spoken so quietly. I turned to look at my daughter-in-law, Stephanie. Her hands were trembling at her waist, fingers knotted together like she was trying to hold herself upright. Her eyes were wide and wet, not yet crying, but close. "What?" I asked, stupidly, not because I didn't hear her, but because my heart hadn't caught up to my ears. She swallowed. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the world tilted. The kettle screamed, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car horn blared. All of it sounded far away. Pregnant. My first feeling wasn't shock, it was joy. Immediate, warm, reckless joy that rushed through me before logic could catch its breath. A baby, my grandchild. I saw soft blankets and tiny socks and the way my son used to curl his fingers around mine when he was small. But then I saw her face. Fear sat in her eyes like a weight. "Why would you need to hide this?" I asked gently. She shook her head too fast. "You don't understand. If anyone finds out right now, everything will fall apart." That was the moment my life quietly split in two, before the secret and after. Before all of this, I thought I understood my family. I am not a dramatic woman. I taught elementary school for 33 years. I believe in schedules, warm meals, folded laundry, and saying please and thank you even when you're angry. My house has always been a place of routine: coffee at 6, soup at noon, dinner by 7. Nothing fancy, just steady. My son Megan is my only child. His father passed when Megan was still in middle school, and the two of us learned how to be a family of two before he ever became a man. I worked late. He microwaved dinners. We survived in quiet companionship. And I was proud of him, still am, even with everything I now know. When he brought Stephanie home, she was sunlight in human form. Bright dresses, a laugh that filled rooms, eyes that held people's attention without asking for it. She worked in marketing, something I never quite understood but always pretended I did. She talked fast, dreamed big, and made Megan look at her the way his father once looked at me. They married quickly. Courthouse, small dinner afterward, nothing flashy. I remember watching her sign the papers with hands that didn't shake at all, confident hands. Life after that settled into something comfortable. They lived 15 minutes away. Sunday dinners became a habit. Stephanie helped me with dishes even when I told her not to. Megan complained about my cooking like he always had. It felt normal, good normal, until the day she whispered that secret in my kitchen. "I can't let Megan know yet," she said that day, lowering herself into one of my chairs as if her legs might give out. "Not now." I turned off the kettle. The sudden silence rang in my ears. "Why?" She stared at the tabletop. Her finger traced the same small circle over and over again. "Because he's not ready, because it would ruin everything." What everything? Her jaw tightened. "My career, his promotion, our plans. Please, just for a little while, I just need time." I should have asked harder questions. I should have insisted on answers. But fear does something strange to empathy. It disguises itself as urgency. I saw a young woman on the edge of panic, and I did what mothers have always done. I softened. "How far along are you?" I asked. "Almost 3 months. 3 months. A life already forming while the rest of us lived unknowingly beside it." "What about a doctor?" I asked. She nodded. "I've been going alone." I remember feeling uneasy then, a small knot behind my ribs, but I told myself there are many kinds of courage and not all of them come in the shape of loud announcements and happy tears. "If I help you," I said slowly, "this can't go on forever." "I know," she whispered. "I swear, just not yet." And so, without realizing it, I became the keeper of my family's most dangerous secret. The months that followed felt like double life lived in half-light. In public, nothing changed. Stephanie still laughed at the table. Megan still complained about being tired. They still held hands in the car. Sunday dinners continued as always, with roast chicken and soft bread and arguments over politics that never meant all that much. In private, I watched her body change in careful increments. Slightly fuller cheeks, a roundness beneath her sweaters. She would come by during the day while Megan was at work, sitting on my couch with her feet tucked under her, asking for ginger tea and saltines. I learned the rhythm of her nausea, the way her eyes glazed when the dizziness came, the way her hand would find her stomach when she thought no one was looking. I bought baby socks and hid them in the back of my dresser. I went with her to ultrasounds, sitting beside her in sterile rooms that smelled like sanitizer and something faintly electrical. I saw the flicker on the screen, heard the sound that didn't yet sound like a heartbeat but already was one. Every time my chest would ache with a joy I wasn't allowed to show. "Do you ever think about telling him?" I asked once as we drove back from an appointment. Rain streaked down the windshield. The wipers kept time like an anxious metronome. She shook her head. "Not yet." I didn't push again. I told myself I was protecting her, protecting the baby, protecting peace. I didn't realize whose peace I was actually sacrificing. Then came the day she told me her plan. We were folding laundry in my bedroom. The afternoon sun pooled across the quilt. I held one of Megan's old t-shirts in my hands, the fabric thinned from years of wear. "I'm going to say the baby belongs to someone else," she said casually, as if she were talking about changing a hairstyle. My hands stilled. "What?" She kept folding. "Another woman is going to carry the public story. Someone who owes me a favor. She'll say the baby is hers. I'll adopt later." The words didn't make sense at first. They floated in the air between us, disconnected from reality. "You want to erase yourself?" I asked. "It's the only way," she said quickly. "No scandal, no questions about timing, no damage to Megan's reputation, no damage to mine." "And the truth?" I asked. She finally looked at me then. Her eyes were sharp now, not frightened. "Calculating, the truth isn't always useful." A chill slid down my spine. I should have walked away right then. I should have told her this was wrong, dangerous, cruel. I should have picked up my phone and called my son, spilling everything in one breathless confession. But instead, I thought of that flicker on the ultrasound screen, and I stayed silent. The woman she chose was named Meganal. She was distant family by marriage, someone I'd seen only twice at large gatherings. Quiet, unmarried. Always on the edge of the room, as if she were waiting to be dismissed. Stephanie told me Meganal needed money, that she was willing to help for the right price. "You're buying her life," I said quietly. "I'm compensating her sacrifice," Stephanie corrected. The announcement came 3 months later. Megan's phone rang during dinner. I watched his face as he listened, laughing at first, then frowning, then nodding slowly. When he hung up, he looked at Stephanie, confused. "Cousin Meganal is pregnant," he said, "and she's keeping it?" Stephanie's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes." "Isn't that wonderful?" I felt the room tilt again. From that moment on, I became a ghost inside my own family, watching a story unfold in public that I alone knew was built on a lie. Everyone congratulated Meganal. Baby showers were planned, names were suggested, pictures were posted. And every time someone spoke about her baby, my chest tightened around a truth that wasn't allowed to breathe. But the worst part didn't come with the lie, it came with the erasure. And it began the day the baby was born. That was when Stephanie finally disappeared from the story she herself had written and took my place with her. The call came at 2:14 in the morning. Megan's number lit up my phone like an accusation in the dark. I had been half asleep, drifting in that thin space between rest and worry where the mind replays unfinished thoughts. I knew before I answered. "Meganal went into labor," he said. His voice was tight, stretched thin with adrenaline. "We're on our way to the hospital." I sat up in bed, the cold immediately finding my feet. "How far along?" "Full term, they're saying it might be any minute." In the background, I could hear Stephanie's voice, high, urgent, too carefully emotional, performing concern, practicing it. "I'll come," I said. When I hung up, I sat there for a long moment in the dark. The house was quiet, too quiet. The clock on my nightstand ticked like it always had, steady and indifferent. The baby socks were still in the back of my dresser. I could see them in my mind the way you see something even when your eyes are closed. My grandchild was about to be born, and the world was about to welcome the wrong mother. The hospital smelled the way hospitals always do, too clean, too sharp. A smell that doesn't promise healing so much as it demands endurance. The waiting room lights were harsh, bleaching color from faces. Megan paced back and forth, his hands tugging nervously at his sleeves. Stephanie sat perfectly still in one of the plastic chairs, her hands folded in her lap like a portrait of concern. When she saw me, she stood and hugged me tightly. Not in grief, not in panic, in possession. "It's happening," she whispered. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. Meganal's labor took hours. That surprised everyone except me. Stephanie knew the dates, I knew the dates. I watched Megan grow agitated as time stretched on, his excitement turning gradually into worry. Finally, just after dawn, a nurse stepped into the waiting room. "She's delivered," she said. "It's a girl." Megan let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He hugged Stephanie. I watched her close her eyes as if she were the one in pain. "She's asking for family," the nurse added. "Family." I followed behind them down the long corridor. My heart felt like it was expanding and collapsing at the same time, joy and dread locked in a slow battle for space. Meganal looked small in the hospital bed, paler than I remembered. Her face was drawn tight with pain and something else I couldn't quite name at first. The baby was cradled in her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket. My breath caught when I saw her. She had Megan's mouth, the curve of it, the exact, unmistakable shape, the way the upper lip dipped softly in the center. A trait that ran through my late husband's side of the family like a signature. Megan didn't notice. Stephanie did. Her eyes flicked to the baby's face for only a split second before smoothing back into practiced calm. "She's beautiful," Stephanie said softly. Meganal nodded, but she wouldn't look at me. I stepped forward, my legs unsteady, and looked down at the child whose heartbeat I had once heard through a machine in a quiet, private room. She felt real in my arms when Meganal allowed me to hold her, heavy with life. Warm, my grandchild, no one else in that room knew. When I handed her back, Meganal's hands trembled. She whispered a thank you that sounded like an apology. The doctors explained things. Paperwork was signed. Megan took pictures. Stephanie hovered beside him, smiling, shining, claiming credit for support she had never truly given. And just like that, the lie became official. The weeks after the birth were a strange kind of mourning. Everyone celebrated. There were casseroles and balloons and gift baskets. Meganal went home with the baby, and Stephanie and Megan visited often, returning with stories and photos and plans. "Can you believe she has my nose?" Stephanie would say, laughing. My chest would tighten every time. I visited Meganal privately during the day when Megan was at work and Stephanie had appointments. I brought groceries. I held the baby. I watched Meganal move through her days like someone walking underwater. One afternoon, as the baby slept on my chest, Meganal finally spoke the words that had been living between us since the hospital. "I don't think I can do this much longer," she said. "Do what?" I asked gently. "Pretend I'm her mother." I looked down at the tiny face rising and falling against me. The breath was shallow, quick, fragile. "You made an agreement with Stephanie," I said. "I made a mistake," she replied quietly. Something in her voice cracked open my own ribs. We spoke for a long time that day. About money, about pressure, about how Stephanie had promised that this was temporary just until the right moment when things could shift silently, legally, cleanly. "But she keeps pushing it farther away," Meganal said. "There's always another excuse, another delay." I knew this already. Stephanie always needed more time. More space, more control. "She's taking over," Meganal whispered. "She talks about the baby like she belongs to her already." Because she does, I thought, but I didn't say it. The public adoption conversation began when the baby was 3 months old. Stephanie suggested it casually during Sunday dinner. "Meganal is overwhelmed," she said, passing the salt across the table. "She's thinking about giving the baby up, maybe even to someone in the family." Megan's eyebrows lifted. "You mean adoption?" She shrugged like the idea had only just occurred to her. Stranger things happen. My stomach turned. Meganal didn't attend that dinner. She had been tired, according to Stephanie. The following weeks were filled with whispered legal terms and paperwork disguised as helpful concern. Megan was hesitant but sympathetic. Stephanie was tireless in her arguments about stability, about resources, about what was best for the baby. She never once spoke about love. Meganal began to withdraw. When I visited, she spoke less, held the baby longer. Her eyes followed every breath the child took as if she were already preparing for absence. "I don't want her to forget me," she said one afternoon. "She won't," I promised, and in that moment I believed it. The adoption was finalized in a quiet office with beige walls and artificial plants that collected dust. Megan signed with nervous hands. Stephanie signed with steady ones. Meganal signed last. She hesitated just for a moment. Long enough for me to see doubt flicker across her face like a plea for interruption, but no one spoke. The baby was officially Stephanie's now. My grandchild had a new public mother. And the woman who had carried her out of fear and debt disappeared into the background like she had never existed. That should have been the end of the secret, but secrets that survive contact with the world don't die quietly. They stretch, they grow. They learn how to wound. And it was only after Stephanie stood proudly in front of her new life, after she had everything she claimed to want, that she finally erased the last person who had protected her. The first sign that I was being pushed out came quietly. No arguments, no raised voices, just absence. Sunday dinner passed without a call. At first I told myself Stephanie must be tired. New motherhood, even symbolic, could exhaust a woman. The next Sunday passed too, then a third. When Megan finally answered my call midweek, his voice sounded distracted. "We've just been busy, Mom," he said. "The baby's schedule, Stephanie's work starting back up, you know how it is." I didn't know how it was, or I thought I did. "I miss her," I said softly. "I haven't held her in weeks." There was a pause. Just a flicker of silence long enough to feel intentional. "Stephanie thinks it's better if we limit visits for now," he said. "Less confusion for the baby." Confusion, the word landed in me like a stone dropped into water, heavy, rippling outward. "I'm her grandmother," I said. "I know," he replied quickly. "It's not forever, just for now." After the call ended, I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, staring at the place on the wall where the calendar used to hang when Megan was still a boy. I had taken it down after he moved out, but the faint square of unfaded paint remained, a ghost of routine just like me. Stephanie stopped calling entirely after that, no casual updates, no photos, no invitations. When I reached out, replies were short, polite, stripped of warmth. "Busy today, another time. Baby's sleeping." Each message felt like a door shutting softly but firmly in my face. When I finally saw them again, it was at a family gathering, Megan's cousin's birthday party. The room buzzed with conversation, balloons, the smell of sugar and frosting. And there she was, standing near the window with the baby nestled against her shoulder, laughing easily as relatives cooed and leaned in. She looked exactly like what she wanted to be seen as, a mother. No one noticed me at first. When Stephanie finally saw me across the room, her gaze stayed neutral. No smile, no greeting, just acknowledgement without connection. I crossed over slowly. "She's grown," I said, keeping my tone gentle. Stephanie shifted the baby instinctively, tightening her hold. "They do, don't they?" I waited. For her to offer the baby, she didn't. The moment stretched thin and awkward until Megan stepped in, trying to fill the space with noise. "Mom, you should have seen her first laugh," he said. "It was yesterday." I smiled for him the way I always had. "I wish I had," I said. Stephanie looked at me then, really looked at me, her expression unreadable. It's better not to overwhelm her with too many faces. Too many faces. I was no longer family, I was a risk. Megan stopped answering my calls shortly after that party. At first I worried about her safety, her mental state, the sudden silence. I drove to her apartment one afternoon with groceries, but the mailbox bore someone else's name. A neighbor told me she'd moved out weeks ago. No forwarding address. No goodbye. That was the moment the truth settled into my bones. They had removed every loose thread, and I was next. The confrontation I had been avoiding came on a rainy Tuesday. Stephanie invited me for coffee. Her choice of place was deliberate, a small cafe halfway between our houses. Public, neutral, safe. She arrived on time, immaculate as always, hair perfect. Makeup soft and deliberate. A woman who never allowed the world to glimpse cracks. We ordered, sat. For a few moments she spoke about work. About travel, about weather, about anything except what lay coiled between us. Then she folded her hands around her cup and said what she had already decided long before inviting me. "I think it's best if you take some space from the baby." The words were calm, rehearsed. "What?" I asked. "I mean emotionally," she clarified. "This arrangement works best if everyone respects boundaries." I felt something inside me tighten into a knot that no longer had anywhere to hide. "What arrangement?" I asked, her lips curved not into a smile but into control. "The one we agreed on?" "No," I said quietly. "We did not agree to this." Her eyes sharpened. "You agreed to protect my pregnancy." "I agreed to protect a child," I replied, "not to be erased from her life." She took a slow sip of coffee. "Things change." I leaned in. My hands were trembling now, and I stopped them by pressing my palms flat against the table. "She's my grandchild," I said. "You don't get to rewrite that." Her gaze dropped briefly to my hands. When she looked back up, something colder had stepped into her eyes. "You don't have proof," she said. The words landed like a quiet slap. My voice caught. "I was there, I went to appointments, and that would look very strange in court, wouldn't it?" She said softly, "A woman claiming a child based on private doctor visits and whispered secrets?" I felt dizzy. "You're threatening me," I said. No, she replied almost kindly. I'm protecting my family. Her family, not mine. Megan doesn't know, I said. She nodded. And he never will. Something ugly and unfamiliar curled in my chest, rage bright and trembling. You used me, I whispered. Her expression softened, not with guilt, but relief. And you were very helpful. After that day, the door closed completely. Calls went unanswered. Texts remained unread. Megan stopped visiting. I watched my world shrink in small, humiliating inches. The baby shoes stayed hidden in my dresser. Dust gathered on the items I had bought in hope. I began to avoid the places I knew they frequented, the park near their house, the grocery store where Stephanie liked the expensive coffee. The silence was not empty. It was loud. It accused me every night of the one truth I could not escape. I had helped build the lie that destroyed me. The breaking point came unexpectedly. It wasn't dramatic, just a photograph. A friend from church forwarded it to me with a cheerful message. Isn't your granddaughter beautiful? The image showed Stephanie standing in front of a banner at a community fundraiser for new mothers. The baby was in her arms. A caption beneath the photo read, "New mom shares inspiring adoption journey." I stared at the words until they blurred, inspiring. That was when I understood something with devastating clarity. Stephanie hadn't just erased me from her child's life. She had rewritten the entire story, and the world was applauding. The photo stayed on my phone for days. I didn't delete it. I couldn't. It felt like proof of something I wasn't ready to name yet. Proof that the story I had lived in silence had been rewritten without me. Proof that my role in that child's life had been reduced to nothing more than a shadow behind a smiling face. Inspiring adoption journey. The words echoed in my head while I washed dishes, while I folded laundry, while I lay awake at night listening to the tick of the clock and the creak of the house settling into darkness. I had spent my life teaching children about honesty, about kindness, about consequences. And I had broken every one of those lessons in the name of love. I didn't plan to act at first. I told myself I would wait. That time had a way of revealing truth. That lies eventually cracked under their own weight. I had believed that once. I wasn't so naive anymore, but old habits of patience die slowly. Still, the quiet grew heavier. Then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Megan standing on my porch. He looked tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes avoided mine for just a second too long. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk." My heart began to race. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat at the kitchen table, the same place he used to sit doing homework as a boy. For a moment I saw him at 12 again, shoes kicked off, pencil tapping nervously against the wood. The years fell away too easily. Stephanie hadn't come with him. "That's already a conversation," I said gently. He exhaled slowly. "She didn't want me to come." "And yet here you are," he nodded. "Because things don't feel right." I remained silent. "She's different," he continued. "Since the adoption, I mean, controlling, protective in a way that feels," he searched for the word, "fearful, fearful." I felt the truth bristle just beneath my skin, sharp and alive. "She doesn't like that you ask about the baby," he added. "She says it confuses her." My throat tightened. "And what do you think?" He hesitated. "I think a grandmother is not confusing." The relief that washed over me was brief but real. "Megan," I said softly, "do you remember when you were little and lost your first tooth?" He glanced up, surprised by the question. "Yes, you cried," I continued. "Not because it hurt, but because you didn't know what it meant, and I told you sometimes growing hurts before it makes sense." He studied me carefully now. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied, "that sometimes the truths we're afraid to face hurt less than the lies we cling to." He swallowed. "Is there something you're not telling me?" For a moment, I almost did it. The words pressed against my teeth like they were desperate to be free. The truth would have spilled out in one trembling breath. But then I saw his hands. They were shaking, and I saw the boy in him again, the one who had already lost a father far too early. The one who trusted the woman he had built a life with, and I was afraid that the truth wouldn't free him. It would break him. "There are things in this life people do because they're afraid," I said instead. "And sometimes fear builds more walls than love ever could." He nodded slowly. "I just want my family to feel honest." "So did I." I reached across the table and took his shaking hands in mine. "Whatever happens," I said, "remember that I love you always." His eyes grew glassy. "I know." When he left, I stood in the doorway long after his car disappeared down the street. The truth had been right there, and I had let it pass me by. Again, 2 weeks later, Stephanie made her next move. Papers arrived in the mail. Legal papers. A formal request? No, not even a request. A declaration. A cease and desist order citing harassment, emotional interference, and destabilizing behavior regarding their child. Their child. The words felt grotesque on the page. I read the document twice with shaking hands. It instructed me to cease all attempts at contact with the family and to refrain from public statements or claims regarding the child's origin. Public statements? Claims? They were terrified the truth would surface, and now they were trying to legally silence me. That night, I sat alone in my living room with the document spread out on the coffee table. The lamp cast a soft yellow circle over the harsh legal language. My reflection in the darkened television screen looked older than I remembered. I have done nothing wrong, I whispered to the empty room, but the paper didn't care. Sleep didn't come easily after that. Thoughts chased one another in endless loops. What if they took further legal action? What if Megan believed her version of events completely? What if I never saw that child again? Every what if ended in the same cold place alone. In the early hours before dawn, I rose and opened the drawer where I kept old documents. Birth certificates, medical records, appointment cards. I hadn't intended to keep everything, but I had. Every ultrasound date, every clinic receipt, every handwritten note from the doctor, not as evidence. At least that's what I had told myself. But as I spread those papers across the table now, one truth stood undeniable. I was the only person who could prove what Stephanie had erased. The next day I called Megan. I stared at her number for a long time before pressing it. I had saved it in my phone months ago. I didn't even know if it would still reach her. It rang, once, twice. Then her voice answered, cautious and small. Hello. Megan, I said softly. There was a long pause. I wondered when you'd call, she finally said. I didn't know if you wanted me to. I didn't know if I deserved you to, she replied. Another silence unfolded between us, thick with things unsaid. They've cut me off, I told her. Legally, she exhaled sharply. They threatened me with the same thing. My chest tightened. When, months ago after the adoption, I was told any contact would be considered destabilizing. So you vanished, I said. Yes, she whispered. I was afraid. So was I. For the first time since the lie began, I did not feel alone inside it. We met 3 days later at the same cafe where Stephanie had erased me with a cup of coffee and a steady voice. Megan looked thinner. Tired in a way that sleep could not repair, her hands shook when she lifted her cup. I miss her every day, she said. I nodded. Me too. She calls her my miracle, Megan continued bitterly, as if I had nothing to do with that. My hands curled slowly around my cup. They are rewriting history. Yes, she said, and we are the footnotes they want gone. The word sent a strange current through me. I don't want to be gone anymore, I said. Megan looked at me, eyes wide. What are you saying? I'm saying, I replied, that I am tired of being quiet. Fear flickered across her face, then something else joined it, relief. That night I made a decision I could not undo. For the first time since the secret had been whispered in my kitchen, I stopped protecting Stephanie's story and started protecting the truth. The first thing I felt after deciding to stop protecting Stephanie's story was fear, not loud fear, not panic. The quiet kind that settles into your bones and makes every choice feel heavier than it should. For days after meeting Megan, I moved through my house as if I were being watched. Every passing car slowed my heart. Every unfamiliar number on my phone made my chest tighten. I slept in fragments, waking at the smallest sound, but beneath the fear was something else. Resolve. I had lived in silence long enough. Megan and I began meeting once a week, always in public places, always careful. We spoke in low voices, leaning toward each other like conspirators. Between us, the truth unfolded slowly, more detailed, more devastating with every conversation. Stephanie had not only paid Megan to claim the baby as hers, she had coached her, what to say to doctors, what dates to use, how to act. She told me if I ever backed out, she'd ruin me, Megan said one afternoon, her fingers trembling around a napkin. She has screenshots, messages, she knows about things in my past I never wanted anyone to know. Blackmail, the word tasted bitter in my mouth. And Megan. I asked. Megan shook her head. He doesn't know anything, she made sure of that. That didn't surprise me. Stephanie had always been careful about which truths she allowed close to him. I began organizing my own records that same week, not in a rush. Not with panic, with precision. I laid everything out across my dining room table: ultrasound appointment cards, doctor receipts, pharmacy records under Stephanie's name from months before the birth, text messages saved deep in my phone where Stephanie begged me to stay silent, dates, times, patterns. The truth revealed itself in neat, undeniable lines. Every piece alone could be dismissed. Together, they told a story that no amount of smiling photos could erase. The moment that forced my hand came sooner than I expected. It happened at the church fundraiser. The same one from the photograph. I hadn't planned to go. I knew Stephanie would be there. I knew the sight of her holding that baby in public would carve something raw inside me. But Meganal called that morning, her voice trembling. "They're giving her an award," she said. "For community motherhood." Something broke loose inside my chest. I went. The hall was packed with folding chairs, bright banners, and polite applause. I sat near the back, hidden, watching. Stephanie stood at the front in a soft blue dress, the baby cradled against her chest. The crowd beamed at her like she was something sacred. "This year's recognition goes to a woman who embodies selfless love," the host said. The applause was thunderous. Stephanie smiled, and that was when she looked directly at me, our eyes locked across the room, for just 1 second. Her smile did not falter, but her eyes darkened. She knew. The speech was unbearable. She spoke of sacrifice, of fate, of unexpected blessings, of choosing love over fear. Every word slid over the lie like a silk sheet. At the end, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. I remained seated, my hands trembled in my lap. Meganal sat beside me, silent, her face drained of color. "We can still walk out," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "We've walked out long enough." That night I received the message I had been dreading from Stephanie. "You went too far tonight," that was all it said. No greeting, no pleasantries, just a boundary drawn in cold ink. I stared at the words for a long time before typing my reply. "So did you?" The response came instantly. "You don't understand what you're risking." My fingers hovered over the screen, then moved slowly. "I understand exactly what I've already lost." There was no reply after that. The next day, Megan called. His voice was tight again, controlled in a way that told me he was trying not to sound worried. "Stephanie says you showed up at the fundraiser to cause trouble," he said. "I showed up to listen," I replied. "She says you've been crossing boundaries for months." A familiar ache opened beneath my ribs. "And what do you think?" I asked. He hesitated. "I think something isn't right, and I don't know who to believe anymore." That was the crack, the one I had been waiting for without admitting it. "Come see me," I said. "Just you." There was a long pause. "I'll come tomorrow," he finally said. I barely slept that night. Every shadow looked like a witness. Every memory rose like an accusation. Was I about to tear my son's world apart, or was I finally going to return it to him? Morning came slowly. Megan arrived just after 10. He stood in the doorway uncertainly, the same way he had as a boy after breaking something important. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one. Again, Stephanie was not with him. "I need you to tell me the truth," he said. "All of it, no more metaphors." I took a slow breath, and then I told him, not all at once, not dramatically, piece by piece, the secret pregnancy, the appointments, the adoption plan, Meganal, the blackmail, the legal threats. His face changed with every sentence: confusion, disbelief, shock, anger, grief. When I finished, the room felt heavier than it ever had before. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Is she really mine?" "Yes," I said, tears spilled before he could stop them. "And you kept this from me?" "Yes." The word cut deeper than all the rest. "Why?" he asked hoarsely. "Because she made me believe the truth would destroy you," I replied. "And because I was afraid." His jaw trembled. "So you destroyed me slowly instead." I nodded. "I'm sorry." He left without another word. 3 hours later, Meganal called me. "She told him everything was a lie," Meganal said shakily. "All of it." Stephanie had struck first. That night, Megan sent a single message. "I don't know where my child came from anymore." The war had begun. The day after Megan learned the truth, at least my truth, felt like walking through a house after an earthquake. Nothing was visibly broken yet, but everything felt unstable. I didn't hear from him again until late evening. When my phone finally rang, I answered on the first vibration. "Mom," he said quietly, no anger, no accusation, just exhaustion. I went through her phone. My chest tightened. "And there are messages," he said, between her and Meganal from before the adoption. "They talk about dates, money, what story to use." My knees weakened and I had to sit down. So she lied to you, I said. Yes, he replied. About almost everything. Silence poured into the space between us. She says you manipulated Meganal, he added slowly. That you wanted the baby for yourself. The accusation stung but not with surprise. That's not true, I said. I know, he replied. For the first time in weeks I cried openly. The confrontation between Megan and Stephanie happened the next morning. I didn't witness it, I only heard fragments later, jagged pieces that Megan struggled to describe without shaking. He had shown her the messages. She had denied them. Then he showed her the receipts I had kept, the ultrasound cards, the pharmacy records. That was when her story changed. She said she had done it to protect him, to save their future, to avoid questions that would have ruined everything. From what? He had asked, and she had no answer, just tears and rage. Stephanie came to see me 2 days later, unannounced. I was watering my front garden when I heard the sound of her heels on the pavement. The rhythm was sharp, angry, controlled fury in every step. She stood at the edge of my driveway, arms folded tightly over her chest. You had no right, she said. Her voice was calm, but it vibrated with something dangerous beneath it. I had every right, I replied. She is my grandchild. She is my child now, Stephanie snapped. Legally, socially, emotionally. You built that on a lie, I said, and you helped me, she shot back. The truth of that landed hard. Yes, I said quietly, I did. For the first time her expression faltered. You could still fix this, she said. Tell Megan you were mistaken, that grief confused you, he will believe you. No, I replied, her eyes darkened. You'll lose him, she said flatly, and I'll make sure you never see that baby again. I stepped closer to her. You've already done that, I said. She searched my face as if seeing me for the first time, not as a helper, not as a liability, but as a threat. You think truth makes you powerful, she said. Truth only makes you lonely. Then she turned and walked away. The days that followed were filled with arguments I only heard about through Megan's tired voice. Stephanie would cry. Megan would retreat. She would accuse. He would question. The baby became the silent center of the storm, a living reminder of everything they could not agree on. She won't let me take her alone, he said one night over the phone. Ever, she says, I'll let you see her. I closed my eyes. And would you? I asked. Yes, he replied without hesitation. Meganal was summoned to court 1 week later. Stephanie filed a formal motion claiming harassment, coercion, and emotional instability, a preemptive strike. If they discredit me, Meganal whispered over the phone, no one will believe anything I say. They want to bury the truth, I replied, and us with it. The fear in her voice reminded me of myself months earlier. This time, I said, we don't disappear. The hearing was not dramatic, no shouting, no tears, just polished lawyers and sterile language that turned human lives into bullet points. Stephanie sat beside her attorney, composed and graceful. Megan sat behind her, rigid and pale. Meganal sat across the room from her alone, and I sat behind Meganal. The accusations were read aloud. Manipulation, false claims, instability. Then Meganal's lawyer spoke. And one by one the receipts appeared, the messages, the payments, the coaching, the threats. The room changed. Stephanie's composure cracked, not visibly, not dramatically, but subtly. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes flickered. Megan didn't look at her at all. When Meganal took the stand, her voice shook at first, then it steadied. I was paid to pretend that child was mine, she said. And I was told I would be destroyed if I changed my mind. The judge listened. The lies were no longer alone in the room. The ruling was not a final judgment, but it was enough. The harassment order was dismissed. A formal inquiry into the adoption was launched. Temporary protections were put in place. The truth was no longer theoretical. It was official. That night, Megan came to my house. He looked smaller than I remembered, folded in on himself by grief and shock and regret. I believed her, he said simply. So did I replied. He looked up. How did I marry someone I didn't know? I had no answer. He wept quietly at my kitchen table, the same table where secrets had once been sworn. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. I placed my hand over his. You are a father, I said, his breath caught. That's the only part of this that still feels real. Stephanie moved out 3 days later. She took clothes, jewelry, the nursery furniture. But she left behind the story she could no longer control. That night, Megan sent me a photo. The baby lay on his chest, tiny fingers curled around his thumb. She knows me, he wrote. For the first time in nearly a year, hope entered my house again. The house grew louder after Stephanie left, not with noise, but with absence. Megan moved back in with me temporarily. The guest room that once held boxes of old lesson plans and winter coats became his refuge. At night I would hear him pacing the hall, the soft rhythm of his footsteps carrying the weight of thoughts he couldn't put down. The baby stayed with him on a limited schedule, shared custody under temporary orders. The first evening he brought her to my house, I stood in the doorway and watched him unbuckle her from the car seat with trembling hands. "Mom," he whispered, like he was afraid the truth might vanish if he spoke too loudly, "you can hold her." My knees nearly gave out. I gathered her into my arms, slower than I wanted to, gentler than I felt I had to be. She smelled like milk and clean cotton and something warm and new that made my chest ache. Her eyes opened, and she looked at me. Not with recognition, not yet, but with the quiet curiosity of a soul that had not learned fear. I pressed my face into the soft curve of her head and cried without sound. Stephanie did not disappear quietly. She spoke to mutual friends, to relatives, to people I had known my entire life. She painted herself as the betrayed mother, the woman wronged by a jealous mother-in-law and a weak husband. Some believed her, some did not. The hardest part wasn't the judgment. It was the loneliness of seeing familiar faces turn cautious. Healing requires patience, one woman from church told me gently, as if patience would erase deception. I nodded, but patience had already cost me too much. The adoption investigation moved slowly, painfully slowly. Every week brought new paperwork, new interviews, new rounds of quiet retelling. The same questions. The same dates, the same memories. Each retelling reopened the wound, but it also sharpened the truth. It made it harder to ignore, harder to distort. Megan'll testified again. So did I. Stephanie's testimony changed with every telling, small contradictions at first, then wider ones. When the investigator finally asked her why she had blackmailed Megan'll, she broke completely. She was going to leave, Stephanie sobbed, with the baby, after everything I'd sacrificed. The investigator's voice remained calm. And what had you sacrificed? Stephanie had no answer. The hardest conversation came one quiet afternoon when Megan and I sat on the back porch watching the sky change colors. He held the baby against his chest. Her tiny breaths fluttered against his skin. "She smiles at you differently than she does at me," he said softly. "Give it time," I replied. "She's still learning faces." He looked down at her. "I don't know how to explain all of this to her one day." "You won't explain it all at once," I said. "You'll explain it in pieces when she's ready. Just like we did with you when your father died." His eyes filled. "I am so afraid of becoming the wrong parent," he whispered. I took a slow breath. "The wrong parents are the ones who lie to themselves. You're already doing the harder thing. You're facing the truth." Stephanie tried one last time to regain control. She showed up at my house with a lawyer and a rehearsed expression of victimhood. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, sitting straight-backed in my living room. "We can still resolve this privately." Megan stood beside me. "This ended being private the moment you threatened people," he said. She looked at him like he had spoken a foreign language. "You're choosing her over me now?" she asked. "I'm choosing our daughter," he replied. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Given the ongoing investigation, you don't get to threaten her anymore," Megan interrupted, pointing gently toward me. "This stops." Stephanie's eyes flashed with rage, panic, and something like grief all at once. "You'll regret this," she whispered. She left without looking back. The final ruling came 6 months after the first court hearing. The adoption was voided. Paternity was formally established. Custody was granted to Megan with court-supervised visitation to Stephanie. When the judge spoke the words, it felt less like victory and more like gravity finally correcting its course. Truth had weight, and lies eventually could not stand beneath it. Stephanie moved out of town shortly after. No farewell, no apology, just absence. Again, but this time it did not feel like erasure. It felt like release. The first unofficial birthday we celebrated together was quiet. Just Megan, the baby, and me, a single candle on a small cupcake, pink frosting smeared clumsily across tiny fingers, soft laughter instead of applause. "This is enough," Megan murmured as he watched her chew thoughtfully. "Yes," I said, "it is." One evening, as I rocked her to sleep, she lifted her hand and placed it against my cheek. Not by accident, not reflex, purposefully. My breath caught. "She knows you," Megan said softly from the doorway. No, she didn't just know me, she was finally allowed to. But the story was not over yet. Truth's greatest cost is not exposure. It is the quiet reckoning that follows when the noise fades and the damage settles. And that reckoning was just beginning. Peace does not arrive like sunlight. It arrives like dust settling after collapse, slow, quiet, almost unnoticeable at first. In the weeks after the ruling, I kept expecting the other shoe to drop. A new accusation, another letter, some last attempt by Stephanie to bend the ending in her favor, but nothing came. No messages. No court papers, no sudden appearances at the edge of my life, just silence. And for the first time, silence did not feel like a threat. Megan's routine changed completely. He learned the rhythm of bottles and naps, of cries that meant hunger and softer sounds that meant dreams. He learned to move through the house with one ear constantly attentive. He learned how little sleep a person could survive on when love outweighed exhaustion. And I learned how grief and joy can exist inside the same breath. At night, when the baby slept in her cradle in the guest room, Megan would often sit beside me at the kitchen table. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. The comfort was in the shared stillness. "She looks like him," he said once, staring into his coffee. "Like who?" I asked. "My father," he replied quietly. I looked at him then, the man he had become, leaning forward with tired shoulders and open hands. I saw his father in him too, the gentleness hidden beneath duty, the way he carried worry like something sacred. "She does," I said. And for the first time since all of this began, that resemblance did not feel like loss. It felt like continuity. Megan'll sent me a letter, a simple envelope, my name written on it in careful print. I stood in my living room for several minutes before opening it, afraid of what closure might demand. Inside was a single page. "I have moved to a new town. I am rebuilding quietly. I will never forget what you did for me or what we both lost. Please don't carry guilt for surviving this. I am trying to learn not to." There was no return address, only a truth I could finally accept. Some endings do not circle back. One afternoon, as I folded laundry in the warm stripe of late sunlight across my bed, I found the baby socks. Tiny, pale yellow, still folded. I held one between my fingers and felt my throat tighten. For a long time, I had kept them as evidence of a secret. Then as proof of patience, then as an accusation. Now I carried them into the nursery Megan had set up in my old sewing room. I placed them gently in the drawer with the other clean clothes. They were no longer hidden. Stephanie's name stopped being spoken after a while, not out of bitterness, out of exhaustion. Some nights I imagined her in a new city, telling a different version of herself to strangers who had no memory of our family. I wondered if she felt the weight of what she had built and lost, or if she had already rewritten it into something kinder to her ego. It was no longer my burden to interpret. The baby began to laugh, a real laugh. Not the soft breaths of amusement that come early, but the sudden, startling sound of unrestrained joy. The first time it happened, Megan nearly dropped his phone. It startled both of us into silence, then stunned laughter, then tears. "That was real," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "So is everything else now?" One evening, months later, Megan finally asked the question I had been waiting for. "How long did you carry this alone?" he asked. I set down the dish towel. "Long enough to forget what it felt like to breathe freely," I replied. "I hate that I didn't see it," he said. "You weren't supposed to," I replied softly. "That was the design." He bowed his head. "Design can be broken." "Yes," I said, "but blueprints leave marks." My relationship with him changed after that. The son I had raised with one set of truths had become a man who now lived with a deeper, harsher understanding of the world. He trusted less easily, questioned more carefully. He was quieter, but also stronger. "We will tell her someday," he said one night, rocking the baby gently. "Not the cruel parts, just the truth that helps her stand straighter." I nodded. Truth should never be a weapon in a child's hands. I stopped flinching at my phone ringing. I stopped checking windows when cars slowed in front of the house. I slept through the night more often than not. Healing did not feel dramatic. It felt ordinary: laundry, meals, laughter in small rooms. The last trace of fear left me the day the baby reached for me on her own, not placed into my arms, not guided, but chosen. She leaned forward from Megan's chest and stretched toward me with clumsy certainty. When I took her, she rested her head against my shoulder as if this had always been the plan. I closed my eyes. This time I did not cry. That evening, after she was asleep, Megan stood in the doorway of the nursery and watched her breathe. "I lost a wife," he said quietly, "but somehow I found the truth I should have built my life on in the first place." "You didn't lose everything," I said. "No," he agreed. "I found what was real." Still, something remained unspoken between us, not a secret. Not a lie, a reckoning yet to be shaped, because there was one final truth that had not yet fully unfolded, not about Stephanie, not about Meganal, but about me. And the cost of the choice I had made to stay silent for so long, that reckoning was coming. Not in court, not in public, but in the quiet place where forgiveness must pass first through the person who carries it. The reckoning did not arrive like a storm. It came on a quiet afternoon wrapped in ordinary light. The baby, my granddaughter, was napping in her crib. Megan had gone out to buy groceries. The house was still in that way only homes with sleeping children ever are, the air held gently in place by breath you can't hear. I stood alone in the nursery. For months I had cleaned this room, folded small clothes, smoothed tiny blankets, rocked her to sleep when Megan's arms gave out. I had done everything a grandmother does, everything except forgive myself. I sat in the rocking chair and let the past finally catch up to me, not Stephanie's betrayal, not the court, not the lies told in public. Mine, the moment in my kitchen when she whispered she was pregnant and I chose silence. The moment in my bedroom when she said she would erase herself and I chose fear. The moment at my table when my son asked for the truth and I chose to protect a lie instead of him. I had told myself I was protecting peace, but peace built on untruth is only quiet violence. I had sacrificed honesty to keep the appearance of harmony, and in doing so I helped a child nearly lose her father, helped a stranger lose her identity, and helped my son lose his marriage in pieces instead of all at once. The tears came then, not loud, not dramatic. Just steady and exhausting like rain that has been waiting underground for too long. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the empty room, not to Stephanie, to the boy I had raised, to the child who had waited for a truth she couldn't yet name, and to myself. That evening, Megan found me sitting at the kitchen table with my hands folded in front of me, staring at nothing. "Mom," he said, "are you all right?" "I need to tell you something," I said. He sat down slowly. I did not speak about Stephanie. I spoke about me, about the fear that made me quiet, about the guilt that kept me loyal to a story that was harming everyone, about the way I had once believed that being a good mother meant absorbing pain in silence so others wouldn't have to face it. "I thought I was protecting you," I said softly, "but I was protecting my idea of you, the boy who deserved a peaceful world, not the man strong enough to face the truth." His eyes filled. "I didn't want you to carry that alone," I said. "And I didn't trust you with the weight." He reached across the table and took my hands. "You carried it because you loved me," he said. "Yes," I replied, "but love alone doesn't make choices right." He nodded. And then he said the words I had not known I was still waiting for. "You're allowed to be human too, Mom." That night, something inside me finally loosened. Months passed. The baby learned to sit, then crawl, then wobble upright with wide, uncertain steps that always ended in laughter and collapse. Megan found a small apartment nearby, close enough for dinners, far enough to practice being his own man again. Sometimes I would hear him on the phone late at night speaking quietly, carefully to someone who was not me. A woman from his work maybe, a soft voice with no history attached. He did not rush, neither did I. One afternoon, while I was baking bread, Megan looked up from where he sat playing with the baby on the kitchen floor. "Do you hate her?" he asked suddenly. I knew who he meant. I wiped flour from my hands and thought for a long moment. "No," I said finally, "I don't trust her, I don't excuse her, but I don't hate her." He nodded slowly. "I think hating her would feel easier sometimes," he admitted. "Yes," I said, "but easier does not heal." The baby's first birthday came quietly just as we wanted it. No banners, no speeches, no strangers clapping for a story that wasn't theirs, just a cake on my old dining table, pink frosting, one candle. Megan lifted her so she could blow it out, mostly by accident, mostly by laughter. When the flame died, the room felt lighter, not because the past was gone, but because it was no longer running the present. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I stood alone in the kitchen and washed the last plate. The house was dark except for the small light above the sink. For the first time since this story began, I felt something I could barely recognize as peace, not the fragile peace of silence, the steady peace of truth that has already done its worst. Stephanie never returned. She sent no letters, no apologies, no explanations. I stopped waiting, not because I forgave her, but because my life was no longer shaped by what she chose to do with hers. Sometimes, when the baby sleeps on my shoulder and the world feels impossibly quiet, I still think about the woman I was when this began. The one who believed that silence could keep families together. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her one thing. Silence does not save families, truth does, even when it breaks them first. I lost a daughter-in-law, I nearly lost my son, and for a time I all but lost myself. But I gained something I did not expect, the freedom of no longer living inside a lie. The courage to speak even when the voice trembles, and the strange, painful, beautiful understanding that love does not ask us to disappear to prove it is real. It asks us to stand. Now, when my granddaughter reaches for me, I reach back without hesitation. When my son looks me in the eyes, I no longer fear what he might see, and when I speak the truth, I no longer whisper it behind fear. This is not the ending I would have chosen, but it is the one I will live with honestly. And maybe that is what redemption looks like, not perfection, not reunion, not applause, just the quiet dignity of truth finally being allowed to breathe.